What is up guys, Deadset here. In this video I'll go over the Frenzy Thorns Barbarian build, a spec that arose from the 2.4 rework to the Legacy of Nightmares set, as well as the patch 2.4.1 buffs to Barbarian Thorns damage. I'll go over both the progression spec and the Torment 10 speed farming variation. Let's go. In terms of pros and cons when picking the build, I would like to point out that while the video demonstration is a 70 speedrun, optimized setups are already nearing Greater Rift level 90 on the leaderboards. The decimation of this gem upgrading speedrun is done with a severely under-geared character for the spec, with plenty of unspecialized gear and zero cul-de-sac enchantments on any of the pieces. Besides its high potential, another plus of the spec is that it's very visceral slice and dice feeling, which is very barbarian, and I personally prefer it to the glacier rock-throwing Raycore spec, or the huge downtimes of the bombardment Thorns Crusader. The only major downsides to the build I can point out are that A, it's a Legacy of Nightmares spec, which demands full ancient gear, a lot of stat perfection and optimizing rolls, and B, it's really a Thorns spec under the guise of Frenzy, and the skill itself only plays a part as means of quick Thorns application. Now, let's go over the rotation and skill choices. The playstyle of the build focuses heavily on seeking out and assassinating priority targets like elites and champion packs, skipping even substantial groups of smaller enemies due to its lacking AoE damage. This mobility is achieved largely through the combination of Illusory Boots and Furious Charge, and you should aim to reset the cooldown of the latter by charging multiple enemies and taking advantage of the Merciless Assault effect. Once you find a suitable target, the aforementioned elites, debuff it with Threatening Shout Folter and start mowing it down with Frenzy. Ideally, you have Wrath of the Berserker steroid available for any significant fight. Lastly, apply Ignore Pain on cooldown, achieving its permanent uptime through gear and stack rolls, and refresh Warcry as often as you need to maintain its toughness buff. Similarly to an Invoker Thorns Crusader, you'll be applying your Thorns damage through a primary attack. Unlike the Crusader spec, you do not require a set bonus to skyrocket your attack speed. Oathkeeper will take care of that. Your primary concern will be to apply attacks as quickly as possible, and no other Barbarian primary does that better than Frenzy and its attack speed stacking mechanic, further enhanced by the cubed Bastions Revered. The preferred rune for progression is Maniac, for its additive increase to your overall damage, while in speedruns it is advisable to switch to the movement speed oriented Vanguard. As previously mentioned in the gameplay overview, Furious Charge is included in the build strictly for mobility purposes, allowing you to skip trash packs in search for higher impact enemies to fight. Despite your high cooldown reduction on gear, it is still advisable to take the rune Merciless Assault for its reset mechanic, and aiming to hit at least 2 to 3 enemies to always have a Furious Charge available. The remainder of your active skills are split into two rough categories, damage increasing and damage reducing buffs. The first category includes Threatening Shout Folter and Wrath of the Berserker Insanity. The default defensive roll of Threatening Shout is flipped into a 25% additive damage buff against affected enemies in a 25-yard radius, perfectly suitable to a melee spec like the Frenzy Barb. With its generous 6-second duration and the focus of the spec into cooldown reduction, you'll easily achieve permanent uptime of the buff. Sporting significantly less uptime, around 60% even in highly optimized gear setups, Wrath of the Berserker is nevertheless included for the incomparable stat buffs it provides, along with the humongous damage increase of the Insanity rune. In general, limit the use of the skill to elite engagements. Ideally, activate it the moment you reach a physical cycle of the cubed convention of elements, as this will result in 2 full physical cycles of the ring while under the effect of Wrath of the Berserker Insanity. The second category consists of the survivability staples Warcry and Ignore Pain. Warcry is a bread and butter background buff, increasing your toughness the most by balancing your high armor and all resist with a smattering of dodge chance from the Veteran's Warning rune. The buff duration long exceeds its modest cooldown, so do not be lulled and let it fall off. It costs nothing to reapply it at regular intervals. In speedruns, Warcry will also add to your and your group's movement speed via a War Chelonics chain. In progression, however, you'll be wearing Pride of Cassius, and for a good reason. Ignore Pain will be the basis of your survivability by cutting incoming damage in half and making you immune to crowd control. Permanent uptime of Ignore Pain is crucial, so the general recommendation is the longer lasting Ironhide rune, as it demands the least from your gear with its 57% CDR breakpoint. Once fully optimized and past the 63% CDR barrier, you can swap to any rune you fancy, the group-oriented Mob Rule, the speed-boosting Bravado, or the burst heal of Contempt for Weakness. As far as active skill alterations for speed farming go, you'll keep Warcry for its movement speed benefits coming from a swap to Chelonics chain as your belt, and you'll maintain Wrath of the Berserker Insanity for its huge overall presence. Ignore Pain and Threatening Shout will step down, however, replaced by two pure movement speed utility skills, Battle Rage Ferocity and Sprint Marathon. This concludes the overview of the active skills. Now let us look through the passives. The Barbarian answer to Crusader's Iron Maiden, Tough as Nails, doubles your Thorns damage, a natural inclusion to a Thorns-based setup. Its toughness angle is not to be underestimated either, as it boosts your armor by 25%. Lacking the Wrath of the Berserker resetting power of the Immortal King set, the Frenzy Thorns Barb employs other tactics to lower the crucial cooldown. The inclusion of Boon of Bulkathos plays a major part, shaving 30 seconds off of the standard 2-minute cooldown. In a spec that runs no spenders and plenty of generators, including a primary skill and several cooldowns, Berserker Rage has virtually permanent uptime and provides a substantial 25% damage increase. You have a degree of freedom when picking out your final passive slot. A general recommendation is to take Nerves of Steel, the Barbarian version of the standard Cheat Death passive. As a melee spec that tackles sources of damage spikes like Electrified and Fire Chains on a regular basis, a failsafe on a 60-second cooldown is never a bad choice. If you feel your toughness is optimized and your life is not threatened, Ruthless is one of the best damage-oriented choices you have available. It highlights the build's single-target strengths by increasing your damage multiplicatively by 40% during the last third of your enemy's health. Ideally, you'll not have to choose between Nerves of Steel and Ruthless, as you'll take one of them on a Hellfire Amulet. Lastly, you should consider taking Pound of Flesh in speedruns, for its 20% additional movement speed at 5 health globe stacks, a bonus that is trivial to refresh with its generous 15-second duration and a cubed average band. As a rule of thumb, cooldown reduction is the third primary alongside strength and toughness stats that is vital to balance into your gear, as your survivability and damage buffs are all cooldown reliant. With the full 6-second extension on Pride of Cassius, the lowest breakpoint for permanent Ignore Pain Ironhide is 57%. Pushed further to 63%, you have permanent uptime on all of the Ignore Pain runes. Another important primary stat to factor in is attack speed, as Thorns application is directly tied to the speed of your frenzy attacks. It is generally recommended to reach at least 1.84 sheet attacks per second prior to any buffs, which can come from 3 maximized attack speed rolls on gear plus your paragon points, as this will result in the respectable 7-frame frenzy animation breakpoint when fully buffed. As this is a Legacy of Nightmares set spec, you have considerable freedom in picking out the rest of your gear slots. As a rule of thumb, focus on Thorns and remember the ring's requirement for ancient items, as well as their restriction on other set bonuses. You can run individual set pieces with beneficial stats as long as they do not form any set bonus. The Legacy of Nightmares set is a 2.4 rework, allowing you to run any legendary item combination while not losing out on the damage amplification and reduction associated with traditional 6-piece sets. As long as the 2 rings, the Wailing Host and Litany of the Undaunted, are the only active set bonus you have equipped, every ancient item will increase your damage dealt by 100% and reduce damage taken by 4%. In the stats, try to obtain a combination of cooldown reduction and attack speed. Rounding out the jewelry, the next slot is best taken by a Hellfire Amulet, allowing you a free 5th passive slot to take either Nerves of Steel or Ruthless with. Other protective amulets, any of the immunity necklaces or Eye of Vetlich, can also be slotted, but their niche defenses are inferior to the universal effectiveness of the Hellfire amulet. Your helm is best taken by a Leoric's crown. This helm doubles the effectiveness of the slotted gem, becoming the single most powerful source of cooldown reduction offered by a legendary item, 25% with a Flawless Royal Diamond. A notable alternative for the slot can be a well-rolled Andario's Visage with physical elemental damage, necessitating that you cube Leoric's crown and restrict yourself to just one of the synergistic legendary bracers discussed further. 2 protective items in the chest and belt slots provide the bulk of your defenses during progression. Aquila Harass will halve incoming damage as long as Fury does not dip below 90% of its reserve, which is effectively a permanent bonus in this pure generator spec. Being able to disregard your roll on the unique affix range is a great boon, as Thorns is not an inherent roll in the secondary stats, making stats harder to perfect. The unique affix makes a world of difference on the Pride of Cassius, however, and you should seek out the longest 6-second extension of Ignore Pain to reach permanent uptime of your key survival cooldown more easily. In Speedfarm, and especially when grouped up, consider swapping into Chilanic's Chain for its excellent increase of party movement speed. St. Archie's Gauge are the recommended gloves for the build. Previously a support spec staple, they enjoy a rampant growth in popularity due to the Legacy of Nightmares set and their own powerful property. Shielding you with an absorption shield that more than doubles your maximum health, St. Archie's Gauge offers a temporary defensive edge when engaging an elite, which is often enough time for this assassin playstyle to whittle the enemy down. Any legendary pants with the appropriate stats, high toughness and secondary thorns, can fill the leg slot, but if you seek to hyper-optimize your build, you should seek out or gamble on Swampland Waders with a Witch Doctor ult, and then use the Reforged legendary recipe in Kanai's Cube on them with the Barbarian. This will force the item to roll with Barbarian appropriate stats. The Witch Doctor specific affix will naturally go to waste, but the Swampland Waders are able to roll physical elemental damage as a 5th stat, which Thorns damage benefits from. When played correctly, few affixes can catch you as you furious charge your way around combat, even more so if you take advantage of the Act 2 cash legendary Illusory Boots, which make you immune to getting cornered regardless of density and monster speed. Another option for the slot are Ice Climbers, which will not only remove 2 deadly sources of crowd control, but also reduce cold damage as a whole. Bracer legendary affixes will be important not only for the worn equipment, but the armor slot in the cube as well. Several bracer combos are considered viable for the setup, the easiest being worn Sanguinary Vambraces and cubed Vambraces of Sescheron. Sanguinary Vambraces are easiest to perfect, because they are a farmable common Act 1 bounty cash legendary with a natural Thorns roll and a decent fixed value damage proc. Early on in character progression, you should pair them with Vambraces of Sescheron in the cube for the percentage based healing affix, which is an easy source of sustain. Once you perfect your gear to include at least 2 life per hit rolls, you can safely transition to cubing Nemesis Bracers for the additional elites, playing into the strengths of the build. Truly deprived of a recommended legendary for the slot, the shoulders can be taken by your best rolled ancient item. Minor benefits can be found from options such as Deathwatch Mantle and Pauldrons of the Skeleton King, but they cannot be considered a necessity by any means. Your best and likely easiest to perfect option are the craftable Corruption, whose unique high pickup radius is helpful both during pushing attempts to grab globs from afar and during Speedfarm for its synergy with Pound of Flesh and Boon of the Hoarder. Your weapon and offhand slots will be split between Thorns and Frenzy synergy. On the Thorns side, you'll be using the dedicated Hack Axe. Its unique property applies up to 100% of your Thorns damage to every attack, properly benefiting from all sources of bonus damage as of patch 2.4.1. On the generator front, you'll be wielding Oathkeeper. Its damage increasing component will be neglected, but the attack speed increase to Frenzy is vital. Rolls-wise, remember that Thorns specs do not take weapon damage into account, and both your weapons will be pure stat sticks that need strength, cooldown reduction and attack speed. Then, their damage range ideally gets rerolled into life per hit or one of the missing aforementioned stats. Your 3 jewelry sockets will be taken up by the legendary gems Bane of the Trapped, Boyarsky's Chip, and Bane of the Stricken in progression, or Boon of the Hoarder in normal rifts. Bane of the Trapped is a potent source of additional damage, as it is its own multiplier in your total damage calculation. The gem procs itself with its level 25 property when in melee range, making it an excellent companion to this frenzy-centric build. Added in patch 2.4, Boyarsky's Chip fulfills a simple and straightforward purpose, increasing your Thorns damage. Its taunting level 25 property is just added value on top, making it easy to stick elites close to this assassin type build. Introduced in Season 4, Bane of the Stricken occupies the third and final jewelry socket, building up your damage multiplicatively in prolonged fights, and with a level 25 bonus specifically targeting Rift Guardians. This gem is designed to assist during the takedown of the biggest bottleneck in Greater Rifts, the scaling health numbers. In normal rifts, this gem slot should be taken by Boon of the Hoarder. This high utility gem feeds you practically infinite gold and gives you a massive short-term speed boost while picking up gold, automated by a cubed avarice band. The Kanai's cube recommendations are as follows: Bastions Revered for the weapon slot, Vambraces of Secheron or Nemesis Bracers for the armor slot, and Convention of Elements for the jewelry slot. Tucked away in the cube, Bastions Revered offers a key legendary effect for the build, the extension of Frenzy stacks from 5 to 10. The result is a whopping 150% increase to Frenzy attack speed at cap, as well as a 25% damage buff from Maniac in Greater Rift pushes, or 50% additional movement speed from Vanguard when speed farming. As previously discussed on the topic of bracers, you can cube Vambraces of Secheron early on for easy source of sustain, or speed up your rift clear times with Nemesis Bracers once you include enough life per hit on gear. A third alternative is to cube Leoric's Crown, if you have stumbled upon a well-rolled physical Andariel's Visage to wear. The jewelry slot in the cube is best taken by Convention of Elements, whose rotation is key in maximizing the burst potential of the spec. Matching your Wrath of the Berserker activations with the beginning of a Convention of Elements physical cycle will allow you 2 full cycles at your best offensive potential, adding an impactful timing element to an otherwise simple playstyle. When speed farming, use the Act 3 Cash Legendary Ring Avarice Band. Its unique property extends your pickup radius to the massive 30 yards for a generous 10-second period. Triggered, maximized, and constantly refreshed from the endless stream of Boon of the Hoarder gold, the ring and the gem will keep you sped up throughout the rift. In the Paragon points, max out movement speed to the 25% cap, and spend the rest on strength in the core section. Prioritize cooldown reduction and attack speed in offense. All resistance followed by life percentage and armor in defense, and finally focus on life per hit and area damage in utility. And this is it for the in-depth look at the Frenzy Thorns Barbarian. You can find the full written version linked in the description below, as well as a Google spreadsheet linking to my detailed guides for every build in Diablo 3. I hope you enjoyed this guide, and if you did, I would appreciate your subscription to my channel. Talk to me on Twitter and Facebook that I link below, and I'll see you guys next time.